So, hello and welcome to this new series, and as you might have seen in my community post, I wanted to launch a new series called Rate My Tune, and this is basically where you send me your tune along with basically a log, the specs of your car, and maybe a dyno graph if you have one. And yeah, I look at the tune in a video and see what could be made better, or what is already good, to show other people what is a good example of a tune. And this is not to blame anybody on how bad somebody's tune is, but to educate people on what can be done better, because we all want to know more, and I want to give you the knowledge I have in tuning a car, and this is basically my way to do it and to help other people out with their tune at the same time. So if you want to participate, send me a DM on Instagram along with yeah, I want to participate in the, I guess, Rate My Tune series or whatever, doesn't really matter. And then I need a couple things from you. I need a tune file. This could be any file, be it Megasquirt, be it Speeduino, so any Tuner Studio file, or you could also send me an ECU master file. It doesn't really matter because most of the softwares are pretty much the same, so I will be able to rate tunes from I will be able to look at tunes from different manufacturers, so Max ECU, Link, Haltech, etc. As long as the software is free, I will be able to look at your tune and we will be able to discuss it within that video. And along with that, it would be nice to have a log file from the current tune so we could see how the car is running, if there are any issues that you have maybe and you want to resolve, so we can also look at that. And then maybe a few pictures of your car, the specifications of the car, that we can look at that. And yeah, and maybe if possible a dyno graph, so that we can see if the curve is good already, or if you have some dips in the curve, and then maybe we can analyze that. And that's basically how we do that. But obviously, this is not only one-sided. I also have to kind of roast my own tune. So here you go. I'm going to show you my first ever tune that I did on an MX-5 Speeduino unit, and that was really the first time I have ever gotten my hands on a standalone ECU. So yeah, I have done some things that aren't really, that don't really work that well. So you will see what I did wrong, and I'm gonna explain what it actually does and how it works and what you should do, or how you should rather do it. Again, if you want to know how to tune your car, I have a Speeduino tuning series, which can also apply to any Tuner Studio based ECU, or any ECU that uses Tuner Studio, as most of the things that you see in Tuner Studio are similar on ECUs such as Speeduino, Megasquirt, Microsquirt, Rust EFI. Some ECUs just have some additional features such as knock monitoring or CAN bus or whatever, but the basics such as fueling, timing, boost control, etc. still apply and can be used in different ECUs, no matter what brand or which manufacturer. Alright, and then have fun with my own roast, I guess. Okay, so as I said, I'm going to start with my tune, and this is basically the first tune I ever did, which I think was like 2020 or early 2021. And this is where I actually started to use programmable ECUs and when I started learning about them. And this is the reason why I always tell people, get a cheap car, or at least a car with a cheap engine that is easy to replace or fix if for example you break something, because that's always a risk if you learn to tune yourself. And yeah, it was an MX-5 1.6 or Miata for the US people. It was an NB, so with the 110 horsepower, as I said, 1.6. And yeah, that was the first time trying to tune a car. I had some issues with the throttle response, which you may see was kind of because some of the maps weren't looking that great. We begin with these settings, where the engine constants, where you can find that or how to set that in pretty much any guide to the Speeduino or to Tuner Studio. So this is pretty basic, and as this was a plug and play unit, I was able to set this, or this was already set for me. The only thing I had issues with was, as I said, kind of the throttle response, and to get that fixed I didn't know that I could do that, but the map sample method, switching that from cycle average to instantaneous, fixed this completely. So I wouldn't even have had these huge problems I actually had with this ECU. So, but these are the things that were preset, so there wasn't really anything that I had to set here, because that was a base map, or that is already on that ECU. And that was a Speeduino ECU also. The next things I tried setting were the acceleration enrichment, because I couldn't get the throttle response quite right. I tried around with that, and you can see here I added up to 250% of extra fuel, obviously only when I pushed on the gas pedal really fast, but that still is way too much, and you're probably gonna be looking at around 20% at like 50 TPS dot. So if the TPS value changes 50% per second, then this value will be added. Or for example, if you change it 220% per second, then for example this value would be the one that would apply. Obviously 220% isn't possible, but if you step on the gas pedal fast, you will change it faster than within 1 second. So for example, if you went from 0 to 100% within 0.2 seconds, for example, that would be a TPS dot of 500. So you can see that this is a kind of realistic value, but the values here, so the percent values, are not really, they don't make sense. Going down to, well, AFR02, I haven't set anything. I just used the wideband to monitor stuff. The limiters are also fine, was 7000 because the engine was stock, etc. Then the VE table, that was where it gets kind of interesting, because as you can see, well, it is kind of all over the place. And this happens when you use just auto-tune without using anything else. The map kind of tends to look like garbage. So it is not really, it is all over the place everywhere. And if you have watched my video on creating a VE table, you are going to look at, or you want to see, a VE table that is very smooth. And as you can see here, if I open the 3D view, it is everything but smooth. And this is going to make for a very, very bad driving experience, especially in part throttle, because, well, you're in part throttle and then you have a VE value, which is basically, with some calculations, the fuel map, so how much fuel is injected into the engine. You have from 94 to 125 back down to 101, but that even at a higher load, so that does not even make sense. You would rather use something like this. So if I would smooth that out, for example, something like this would make much more sense, although these values would still be kind of high. It would probably be looking more like this. So there you go. I have already smoothed that out right here, and it is already looking better in that area. Obviously, while yes, this is just an assumption on how the engine might run in that area, we can adjust or can smooth out the table a whole lot before anything terrible happens. And then you go just off of auto-tune, what it does in that area, and then maybe add a bit of fuel if it's really lean, or let auto-tune do its thing again, and then again smooth out some stuff. Next thing is I'm going to look at the AFR table. Well, because a lot of guides show you how to set this, that was set relatively well too. although maybe a bit lean under full throttle. This was an NA car, so yeah, although you could run at 13 or a 13.5 up to, the MX-5 likes to make most power at somewhere around 12.5 and a bit leaner on the lower RPM side. Stock, they are even richer, so they tend to run up to like 11.8, even as an NA car. So yeah, you will be able to save some fuel if you drive a lot of full throttle. But yeah, here are also some cells that don't really make much sense. Why is there 15? Why is there 14.7 here, but again 14.5 here? I would just do it like that and eliminate those higher numbers, or just add a bit or make it a bit leaner in that area, 15.4 or something, so that in cruise areas you are going to save some fuel. Obviously 15 to 36 kPa isn't really cruise, so you would rather add that like right here and save some fuel there, like going for 15 to 15.5 or even 16, depending on what your engine likes. The AFR table is pretty hard to mess up, as it is shown in a lot of forums and in a lot of videos how to set that correctly. Looking at the spark table, this is also meh. It is not really, it does not make that much sense, especially because why is there like 20 and here's 30 again, and then there's 26 again at full throttle? So that doesn't make sense. Usually the higher you go in load, so in kPa load, you will reduce your ignition angle, and you will run in the cruise, you will run about, depending on how much you are lower than your full throttle, you will run about 5 to 6 degrees more timing than you would under full load. So, and this doesn't make sense at all. So why does it go down here? There should be like a mountain up here, and then it should go down when you go to full load. Especially once you go into boost, it should heavily drop the ignition timing as well. So for example, you'll be looking like something like 36, and the higher you go to redline, the higher the ignition numbers are going to get, because obviously the flame front is going to burn at the same speed, but the engine is rotating faster. This would be looking something like this in an ideal scenario. While yes, 25 is very conservative, but in some engines this might actually be the target to hit. You would have to look at that with your dead cans if you have any, and determine your maximum ignition timing, obviously. This column here also doesn't make much sense. While yes, if you drop below a certain RPM threshold, you might want to advance your ignition timing, because an advance in ignition timing will result in a higher RPM. This can lead to a surging RPM, and I would rather use a closed loop idle control, or even use the idle advanced settings, where you add ignition timing automatically if the RPM drops below a certain limit. This down here, these negative values, are just for a pops and bangs tune. There's nothing really too bad about this. Can be done if you want it, and yeah, that's gonna produce some flames and some pops and bangs also. So that's really nothing to be worried about. If you see this in a map, that's just for some fun to be had for yourself. Yeah, and that's pretty much it. There's nothing that much to be said, because this is just an NA, or this was just an NA car, and was just a base map. But you could see some, well, more or less hiccups I had with my first time tuning car. Obviously you are going to learn a lot of stuff when you do this more often, or when you get acquainted with your car and maybe change hardware and have to retune your car. I had in the past for example, my Passat, where I tuned the car, then I changed the intercooler, and because of that, the car had more, or the engine had more oxygen, because the intake air was colder and therefore more oxygen rich, and therefore the car was running very lean, or rather leaner than it was tuned at, and therefore was running quite high EGTs. And yeah, that was obvious when I pulled out the downpipe, and that was like purple and blue. So yeah, which really doesn't happen that quickly with stainless steel. So in summary, what is it that you have to look out for? Well, basically, if you're trying to, or if you're starting out with tuning, try to get an engine that is cheap, or get a car that is cheap and try it on that first. And for example, like get a universal Spirulino and try to put that in some random car, and yeah, just try yourself out, play around, maybe do a like ultra low budget turbo conversion and see what that's like, because that's always fun, adding horsepower to a car, even if it's like a basic one. And yeah, otherwise you saw my map. Now I want to see yours, or rather you can send me yours. Just again, message me on Instagram, and yeah, I'll let you know the details, what I need from you, and hopefully I'll have some parts in the following weeks for this. And as always, I wish you a nice day, and goodbye.